Life Audio.
The Bible Study Podcast, episode 902. Today, the Bible Study Podcast continues the study of the intertestamental period and the book of 1 Maccabees with chapter 11. Welcome to the Bible Study Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We've got more problems between these kingdoms that Alexander left as Ptolemy is going to invade Syria, but first a word from this sponsor. So one thing that I didn't say last week is we've been measuring off in most of the chapters. It's been this happened in the year such and such. There is no general calendar at this point in world history. And so the way it works when you get that this happened in 160th year, it means that it happened 160 years after the Seleucid kingdom was founded. And that is 9 years after the death of Alexander the Great. And so it's founded roughly in 312 BC. And so all dates in this book are measured from then. Ptolemy invades Syria. Then the king of Egypt gathered great forces like the sand by the seashore and many ships, and he tried to get possession of Alexander's kingdom by trickery and add it to his own kingdom. He set out for Syria with peaceable words, and the people of the towns opened their gates to him and went to meet him, for King Alexander had commanded them to meet him, since he was Alexander's father-in-law. But when Ptolemy entered the towns, he stationed forces as a garrison in each town. When he approached Azotus, they showed him the burnt-out temple of Dagon, and Azotus and its suburbs destroyed, and the corpses lying around, and the charred bodies of those whom Jonathan had burned in the war, for they had piled them in heaps along his route. They also told the king what Jonathan had done to throw blame on him, but the king kept silent. Jonathan met the king at Joppa with pomp, and they greeted one another and spent the night there. And Jonathan went with the king as far as the river called Eleutherus. Then he returned to Jerusalem. So King Ptolemy gained control of the coastal cities as far as Seleucia by the sea, and he kept devising wicked designs against Alexander. He sent envoys to King Demetrius, saying, "Come, let us make a covenant with each other, and I will give you in marriage my daughter, who was Alexander's wife, and you shall reign over your father's kingdom. Now I regret that I gave him my daughter, for he has tried to kill me." He threw blame on Alexander because he coveted his kingdom. So he took his daughter away from him and gave her to Demetrius. He was estranged from Alexander, and their hostility became apparent. Then Ptolemy entered Antioch and put on the crown of Asia. Thus he put two crowns on his head, the crown of Egypt and that of Asia. Now King Alexander was in Cilicia at the time because the people of that region were in revolt. When Alexander heard of it, he came against him in battle. Ptolemy marched out and met him with strong force and put him to flight. So Alexander fled into Arabia to find protection there, and King Ptolemy was triumphant. Zabdiel, the Arab, cut off the head of Alexander and sent it to Ptolemy. But King Ptolemy died 3 days later, and his troops in the strongholds were killed by the inhabitants of the strongholds. So Demetrius became king in the 167th year. So Demetrius, the son of Alexander, revolts against his father. King Ptolemy, his father-in-law, revolts against Alexander and comes and invades and manages to drive him out, and Alexander is killed. So again, there is all of this fighting that has gone on. Alexander the Great left a mess here because he didn't leave one particular person to rule his kingdom. He left these petty kingdoms that are always at war with one another or making treaties with one another and then at war with one another. And it just goes on like that for this entire time period. And so this is not the first or the last time that the Seleucid kingdom and the Egyptian kingdom are fighting each other. And it's just the way things were. And so the winner in all of this is Demetrius, who is this, again, Alexander's son, and he ends up marrying Cleopatra. So now Cleopatra is married to her second of the three Seleucid kings that she will be married to. Continuing on, Jonathan's diplomacy. In those days, Jonathan assembled the Judeans to attack the citadel in Jerusalem, and he built many engines of war to use against it. But certain renegades who hated their nation went to the king and reported to him that Jonathan was besieging the citadel. When he heard this, he was angry, and as soon as he heard it, he set out and came to Ptolemais. And he wrote Jonathan not to continue the siege, but to meet him for a conference at Ptolemais as quickly as possible. When Jonathan heard this, he gave orders to continue the siege. He chose some of the elders of Israel and some of the priests and put himself in danger, for he went to the king at Ptolemais, taking silver and gold and clothing and numerous other gifts, and he won his favor. Although certain renegades of his nation kept making complaints against him, the king treated him as his predecessors had treated him. He exalted him in the presence of all his friends. He confirmed him in the high priesthood and in many other honors as he had formerly had, and caused him to be reckoned among his first friends. Then Jonathan asked the king to free Judea and the 3 districts and Samaria from tribute, and promised him 300 talents. The king consented and wrote a letter to Jonathan about all these things. Its contents were as follows. King Demetrius, to his brother Jonathan, and to the nation of the Jews, greetings. This copy of the letter that we wrote concerning you to our kinsman Lasthenes, we have written to you also, so that you may know what it says. King Demetrius, to his father Lasthenes, greetings. We have determined to do good to the nation of the Jews who are our friends and fulfill their obligations to us, because of the goodwill they showed toward us. We have confirmed as their possession both the territory of Judea and the 3 districts of Apharamia and Lydda and Ramathian. The latter, with all the regions bordering them, were added to Judea from Samaria. To those who offer sacrifice in Jerusalem, we have granted release from the royal taxes that the king formerly received from them each year from the crops of their land and the fruit of the trees, and the other payments henceforth due to us of the tithes and the taxes due to us, and the salt pits and the crown taxes due to us. From all these we shall grant them release, and not one of these grants shall be cancelled from this time on forever. Now, therefore, take care to make a copy of this, and let it be given to Jonathan and put up in a conspicuous place on the holy mountain. Remember, at one point, Jonathan had to choose, was he going to back one or the other in the civil war? And he backed Alexander, the father of Demetrius, even though the other one was offering him no taxes, and we're going to take the garrison out of that citadel, that thing that has been a thorn in the side of Judea, the fact that the king has this fortress there. But he didn't back that guy, and so he didn't get that deal until now. Until now, they get the deal of the no taxes. But at the time that this happens, he is still fighting and besieging that citadel. So we'll see if that works out for him okay. One more section here. The intrigue of Trypho. When King Demetrius saw that the land was quiet before him and there was no opposition to him, he dismissed all his troops, all of them to their own homes, except the foreign troops whom he had recruited from the islands of the nations. So all the troops who had served under his possession hated him. A certain Trypho had formerly been one of Alexander's supporters. He saw that all the troops were grumbling against Demetrius, so he went to Imalcu the Arab, who was bringing up Antiochus, the young son of Alexander, and insistently urged him to hand Antiochus over to him to become king in the place of his father. He also reported to Imalcu what Demetrius had done and told of the hatred that the troops of Demetrius had for him, and he stayed there many days. Now Jonathan sent to King Demetrius the request that he remove the troops of the citadel from Jerusalem and the troops in the strongholds, for they kept fighting against Israel. And Demetrius sent this message back to Jonathan: Not only will I do these things for you and your nation, but I will confer great honor on you and your nation if I find an opportunity. Now then, you will do well to send me men who will help me, for my troops have revolted. So Jonathan sent 3,000 stalwart men to him in Antioch, and when they came to the king rejoiced at their arrival. Then the people of the city assembled within the city to the number of 120,000, and they wanted to kill the king. But the king fled into the palace. Then the people of the city seized the main streets of the city and began to fight. So the king called the Jews to his aid, and they all rallied around him, and they spread out through the city, and they killed on the day of about 100,000. They set fire to the city and seized a large amount of spoil on that day and saved the king. When the people of the city saw the Jews had gained control of the city as they pleased, their courage failed, and they cried out to the king with this entreaty, "Grant us peace and make the Jews stop fighting against us in our city." And they threw down their arms and made peace. So the Jews gained glory in the sight of the king and of all the people in his kingdom, and they returned to Jerusalem with a large amount of spoil. So King Demetrius sat on the throne of his kingdom, and the land was quiet before him. But he broke his word about all that he had promised. He became estranged from Jonathan and did not repay the favors that Jonathan had done for him, but treated him very harshly. Well, that does not sound like it's going to go very well for Demetrius, I'm going to guess here, but we're going to have to wait and find that out next time, because we're going to end at this point here. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at thebiblestudypodcast.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening. I want to take just a second to thank the team at Life Audio for their partnership with us on this podcast. If you go to lifeaudio.com, you'll find dozens of other faith-centered podcasts in their network. They've got shows about prayer, Bible study, parenting, and more.
In a world where relationships are easily broken and often discarded, the Rebuilding Us Marriage podcast is your lighthouse, guiding the way to hope, restoration, and transformation in Christ. I'm your host and marriage coach, Dana Shea. Join me as we discuss the necessary tools for rebuilding marriages from adversity, betrayal, and disconnection. It's time to reignite love as we rebuild marriages from the ground up. Listen to the Rebuilding Us Marriage podcast on lifeaudio.com or wherever you get your podcasts.